Hey guys, Edre here, and today I'm going to be doing a new album review, and the album I'm going to be reviewing today is the brand new Ty Dolla Sign album, featuring Ty Dolla Sign. Now, a bit of background like I do with all my reviews, I have always felt that he had a bit of a standout sound compared to a lot of the other artists and rappers out there right now. Now, I've yet to be really impressed like I have with, say, Travis Scott, but I have always felt that his features and, for the most part, his projects have been relatively consistently good. And like I said, none of them have really blown me away, but I went into this optimistic because I've liked what I've heard so far, and I've always been intrigued with the sort of style he goes down. So on this album, featuring is what I'm just going to call it, it's sort of your very ethereal trap pop at its core here. I mean, when you really boil it down, that's kind of what's going on here. It's a very atmospheric, very ethereal, take on the sort of pop rap, pop trap stuff you've been hearing. And I will say right off the bat, before we even get into the track list, he does not disappoint with his delivery here. He has some excellent and very strong delivery here, with some he's doing this over some very solid and impactful instrumentals and beats, which I think is great because unfortunately a lot of these artists, they may have a lot of talent, they may have a good style, but the actual instrumentals and beats themselves is where I draw a problem with. Although this album really does have some of the most intriguing beats that I've heard all year, to be honest with you. And I love how there's little pieces of guitar work sprinkled throughout the entire album, which sort of adds an extra character to this set to his sound, which really makes him stand out amongst his contemporaries. And before I get into the tracks, I think it is worth noting that the actual transition between each of the tracks is actually executed really well. Well, a lot of these sort of really long, bloated 25-song albums like this one is, a lot of them don't really have the best flow between tracks, and it's more of a compilation of a bunch of songs. This one does have a good flow, and despite there being a good amount of interludes and songs like that in between, none of them take away or make this album feel long and dragged out. In fact, they just add to the overall tone and atmosphere of the album. So, even though most of the songs are short and they all flow together pretty nicely, let's get into some of the highlights and some of the parts that I was not as crazy about. Let's start with the first real song after the intro on this album, Status. A really solid track that really sets the overall tone and mood and style of the album. With a very more atmospheric production, it sort of sucked me in right away. And I think what really made it even better was the transition into Temptations, where Kid Cudi's feature really brings the song home. And just this song and that song, solid beats, solid mood, really good. And for most part, lyrically, I think it was pretty good as well. So right off the bat, this album started with some tracks that I thought were quite good. And one of the songs that really stuck out to me early on in the album was Spicy featuring Post Malone. Now, for those who don't know, I have been very into Post Malone's music, really for everything he's put out. However, lately I've been a bit skeptical ever since Hollywood's Bleeding come out, because a lot of the features he's been on, a lot of the songs he did, like with Tyler Yahweh, for example, I thought his delivery was less than impressive. However, on Spicy, Post Malone delivers with a really great verse, which I think is probably his best thing he's done since his album came out a year ago. And it's just, at its core, it's a nice trap banger. It's not revolutionary by any means, but it's very well executed. The song track 6, however, really does take this album to the next level. It's a great blend of that traditional trap with a very R&B and very traditional hip-hop sound to it, with some of the best features on this entire album, with all of them doing pretty well. And perhaps the most interesting to me was that he was able to get big league artists like Kanye West on this song, as well as on another song later on. So I gotta give Ty Dolla Sign a lot of credit for assembling a lot of these features together. Unfortunately, not every song is necessarily the most positive here. The song Freak, in my opinion, was a bit more of a weak filler track, probably my least favorite on the album, with poor lyrics and a not so great delivery. But luckily, the album does pick up, and most of the songs on here, even the ones that don't leave nearly as big of an impact, play a crucial role to the overall atmosphere and vibe of the album, that even if they aren't the most memorable, they are key parts of the album, and I was left still satisfied with a lot of these tracks. You know, a song like Expensive was one of the ones where the more guitar lead really did stick out to me. I really do enjoy it when these artists sort of bring outside instruments into the sound that you don't usually hear, and it was kind of nice to hear a song based around that. And this happens again on a song like Time Will Tell later on in the album, where it has a very kind of emo rap Juice WRLD type beat with some pretty strong delivery, and I was kind of glad to hear that little guitar in there. And I also, one of the last things I'll talk about here is I really do enjoy the blend of the R&B sounds into his style here while still keeping it very atmospheric. You know, a song like Tyrone 2021 is very smooth, has a very smooth R&B and classic hip-hop tone to it, while having a bit of a modern flair, and I kind of like the drum breaks they kind of cut into the song, kind of giving it an extra spice that some of the other tracks don't have. And last but not least, I am going to talk about two other songs that I thought were some of the best on here. Real Life. I thought Real Life had a very great guitar-based beat with smooth flow across the board, a good R&B blend, one of my favorite tracks, and perhaps one of my top tracks on here is Lift Me Up with Young Thug and Future on here. And the reason I like this one a lot of it lies with Young Thug. I've always been a fan of Young Thug. His album that came out last year was phenomenal, and he continues to do a strong delivery on this track. Solid track with solid features. So at the end of the day, how do I feel about this album as a whole? After all, it is 25 songs long, and I've covered a few albums that are this long this year, and most of them fall somewhere in the middle. But I actually was really impressed by the way that he was able to keep my attention span going. And I have a good attention span when it comes down to music, but a lot of times when these more popular rappers put out big albums, a lot of times it feels like a cash grab, like they're doing so many songs to rack up the streams to get better chart positions. And well, I'm sure that's what's going to happen here. None of the songs really take away from the album. Even the songs that I said were kind of weak, like Freak, I was still left feeling that they played a crucial role in this album's development. And even all those little interludes that were snuck in there, once again, played a key role to the sound of the album and were intriguing listens. While they may not have been great standalone songs, they really fit with the tone of the album. And overall, I think Ty Dolla $ign was able to put together and craft a very well-focused, very well-thought-out album that is very long, very, loaded with features, yet still having a pretty consistent tone to it, a pretty consistent atmosphere, pretty consistent feeling, and a pretty just consistent run of good songs scattered throughout the entire project that I think will be memorable and will be considered some of Ty Dolla $ign's best songs down the line. So with all this being said, and despite me having a few criticisms of a few tracks here and there, I feel like Ty Dolla $ign really did hit it out of the park from what I was expecting him to do, considering some of his previous works. I enjoyed them, but they were far from, stopping me in my footsteps. Needless to say, I was left satisfied with this album, despite it being very long. I feel like all the songs add to it, and there's an overall consistently good artistic style to it, and I have settled on giving Featuring Ty Dolla $ign a light 8 out of 10. Now that's a pretty good review, because anything above a 5 is good, anything below is bad. So an 8 out of 10 is a very positive review. Now it's not the highest score I've ever given, but I do think that Ty Dolla $ign is one of the most promising of these type of rappers out there right now. He's definitely up there with the ranks of guys like Travis Scott and Young Thug out of this newer generation. And I do think that he has a pretty promising sound. And I really love this album. I love the way it turned out. I have a few criticisms here and there, basic criticisms. But I was left overall satisfied, and it turned out better than what I was honestly expecting. So that is it for this video featuring Ty Dolla $ign, 8 out of 10. Goodbye.